The ring King Felipe bought for Leonor. Morning light catches on polished stone inside the royal palace. Not the kind meant for spectacle. The quiet kind that reveals detail only to those who know where to look. A small object rests in a private hand. Circular, unbroken, heavy with intention. The words are plain, almost disarming. But in royal houses, nothing given by a reigning monarch is ever simple. The ring was chosen by King Felipe VI for Princess Leonor. Not announced, not framed for public emotion. Allowed to exist quietly, the way power prefers to move. In royal houses, a ring is never just a gift, it's a message about timing, control, and succession. From the outside, the modern instinct is to search for romance. To decode affection, to ask whether this object signals a future that feels familiar to civilian life. That assumption does not survive long inside the institution, because this is the living thread of continuity. And continuity does not speak in sentiment. It speaks in symbols that endure pressure. 2 minutes in, the first reframing settles in. This ring was not designed to announce something beginning. It was designed to restrain something from beginning too soon. Spain has learned, repeatedly, that premature symbolism can fracture authority. That visible gestures, if misread, can invite instability. And that succession is not a moment, it is a process managed across decades. National identity is woven into these rituals. Into what is shown, and into what is deliberately withheld. Spoken again, the phrase sharpens. Because a father who is also a king gives differently. He gives with the weight of the Constitution in his hands. In the United States, observers do not read the ring as a personal token. They read it as containment. A sign that the institution is pacing visibility, controlling narrative, and limiting variables during a generational transition. In the United Kingdom, the interpretation is instinctive. They recognize the language of symbolic timing. They understand that objects can anchor authority, or destabilize it, depending on when they appear. Canada and Australia see something else. A future head of state being shaped without distraction. A monarchy learning from the pressures of modern visibility and choosing restraint over immediacy. Germany reads it structurally, as a signal of constitutional discipline. An heir protected from premature role collision. By 8 minutes, the deeper mystery becomes impossible to ignore. Why allow the ring to exist at all? Because control does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means possession without display. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, and equally in deliberate invisibility. At 10, the strain begins to surface. The world notices objects. Photographs circulate. Questions multiply quietly. Every object introduced into the public imagination creates a narrative risk. And every narrative risk must be neutralized before it grows teeth. This ring walks that line. At 14 minutes, the point of no return arrives rhetorically. Because once an object like this exists, it cannot be ungiven. It must be contextualized, contained, managed across time. The institution accepts that cost because the alternative, emotional vacuum, is more dangerous. By 19 minutes, the future threat is visible but distant. A political shift, a debate about relevance. A moment when symbols will be interrogated for meaning rather than accepted as tradition. When that moment arrives, the heir must stand grounded in authority, not entangled in interpretation. One final time, the phrase settles differently. Not as affection, not as promise, but as preparation, because in royal houses, rings do not point forward alone. They anchor the present, they stabilize the future, they remind everyone watching that timing, not desire, governs succession. And as Spain continues its quiet calibration, and global institutions observe without urgency, one truth remains unmistakable. This gesture was not an ending. It was not a beginning. It was a pause, shaped like a circle. And the story it belongs to is still unfinished. The ring does not travel alone. It moves with memory. Long before it ever touched her hand, Spain had already decided what it would mean. Not publicly, institutionally, because succession is never improvised here. It is rehearsed quietly, behind stone walls and constitutional language. Princess Leonor de Borbón y Ortiz is growing into a role that tolerates no ambiguity. Every object associated with her becomes a signal. Every signal is evaluated for durability. This is why the ring remains controlled. Why it appears rarely. Why it is never explained. Explanation invites interpretation. Interpretation invites pressure. Spain has lived through moments when symbols moved faster than institutions. When expectation outpaced readiness. When private life collided with public consequence. Those scars are not spoken about openly. But they govern everything. By now, the audience senses what is at stake without it being named. This ring is not a shortcut to the future. It is a guardrail. In the United States, this restraint reads as strategic maturity. A system signaling that it understands media cycles, market confidence, and the value of delayed clarity. Stability, there, is currency. In the United Kingdom, the silence around the ring feels familiar. They recognize the discipline of withholding narrative oxygen. They know that the crown survives not by feeding curiosity, but by outlasting it. Canada and Australia watch for coherence, not romance. They measure whether the institution can still produce authority that feels inevitable rather than manufactured. Germany sees the legal architecture underneath the gesture. A monarchy that understands that personal milestones must never outrun constitutional grounding. At this stage, the deeper tension surfaces. Because time moves forward whether symbols are released or not. The air matures, public presence expands, global visibility sharpens, and the ring waits, not hidden, not denied, held in reserve. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence and disciplined absence. The risk is not that the ring will be misunderstood. The risk is that it will be understood too early. At this point, the institution faces a narrowing corridor. Release the symbol too soon, and it defines the narrative. Hold it too long, and speculation fills the void. This is the tightrope monarchies walk in the modern age. Not between love and duty, but between visibility and control. When the phrase returns, it no longer feels gentle. It feels deliberate, because a father who governs must sometimes protect by postponing. He must choose when meaning is allowed to crystallize. The future strain is already visible at the horizon. A generational shift in how authority is recognized. A world that demands transparency while still craving permanence. When that pressure arrives fully, every symbol will be audited, every silence interrogated, and when that moment comes, the ring will speak, not because it is shown, but because it was waited for. Until then, it remains what it was always intended to be. Not a promise, not a declaration, but a controlled constant inside a moving system. The circle holds, time advances, and the institution watches itself carefully. What happens next will not be accidental.